It's time for episode 35 of the Mystical Times blog podcast with me, Michelle Eve. On this Halloween episode, we hear about the paranormal activity that has been witnessed around houses that ended up with horrific names. Those names being the Hangman's House and the Murder House. Naming houses is usually a reflection of those who lived in the properties or where the properties were located. In rural areas, you could hear a house name like the Pines, as the house was built by where pine trees once stood, or if the property was rather grand, it would be named something as simple as Redwood Hall, so this would let you know it was a very large property. You have other names like the Old Smithy, which would tell you the property was once a blacksmith's, and other properties called the Old Vicarage would have meant a vicar and his family had lived there whilst working for the local church. So there are many meanings to those house names throughout history, but when you come across houses called the Hangman's House and the Murder House, it can lead you down some very dark and horrific history of those buildings. Join me as I share the hauntings and the dark, wicked crimes behind the Hangman's House and the Murder House. I was looking through old newspapers and I come across a report in a local Gloucestershire newspaper from 1931 that told of the strange experiences of a family who were travelling on the road between the towns of Tewkesbury and Ledbury. They wanted a rest from their travels, so stopped in front of an empty cottage. The cottage appeared to be in disrepair, and the garden had been overtaken by weeds, shrubs, and ivy. It was here that the family experienced some unexplained activity. The family, father, mother, and their pre-teen children, sat on their picnic blanket, chatting away to each other, when they were startled by a low groaning noise. They tried to apply logic to the noise, thinking it was perhaps a large vehicle approaching, so carried on chatting. The groaning noise started again, and this time the family grew scared. It then stopped, only to begin again within a minute or so. The father and the oldest son decided to look into the cottage, thinking it was coming from there. They went inside the building, but found nothing. The father and son returned to the rest of the family, and it was decided it was best they pack up and leave, as the family grew rather frightened by what had occurred. They drove into the next village, and they started speaking to the locals there, telling them about what they had experienced. The locals knew the house as the Hangman's House, as it was said there had been a murder by hanging that happened at the house many years ago. But some of the locals said that these noises were of a natural occurrence, as in the wind blowing through the masonry of the building, or maybe it was just someone joking around, trying to scare the family. It was also stated that many locals had witnessed similar activity around this house and the road it stood on. The road was a lonely area, but very picturesque, and as the house was in a very rough state, locals said this would lead to the idea that what was being experienced was something supernatural. It was a couple of weeks later that a reader to the newspaper wrote about his friend who lived in the area of the Hangman's House and had in their possession an old newspaper cutting from 1891, which reported the murder of 4 people living in a property nearby. They enclosed the following information. The Murder House. A Forthampton friend left at our publishing office a very curious original copy of a small bill measuring 11 inches by 6 inches, which had been found amongst a collection of papers of the late Mr. John Knight of Downing Farm. It bears the date the 9th of May 1780 and furnished information of the tragedy. which had been perpetrated on the previous Sunday at the residence still known as the Murder House. The information of the text stated this: an account of 4 people cruelly murdered in their beds. After giving an account of the murder, it went on to state, in the London Gazette, November the 17th, 1781, there appeared an advert giving details of the murders and offering a free pardon to any accomplice. No clues were obtained respecting the murders for nearly 50 years, but in the year 1829, an aged labourer called James Tainton, who had been working for another landowner, died in the Worcester Infirmary, who, in his last hours, confessed he was implicated in the brutal affair and, in his own words, that he nobbled one of his victims with a hedge bill and that his accomplices were all dead. After this, I found more information pertaining to the murders and the possible motive for the labourers' heinous actions. The murder victims were Edward Gummery, his wife Elizabeth, their young daughter Anne, and Elizabeth's brother Thomas Sheen. They all died by having a heavy implement, like an axe, brutally smashing up their bodies. It was thought that Edward was murdered due to him being employed by the local landowner and had been putting up fencing on land, which some people thought was taking away rights from those who used this land to walk to various places. Some of the fencing had been burnt down, and Edward had put up replacements. Several people had been sent to prison for their part in the burning. There is a stone tablet at the local church where the Gummerys had lived, and it has an inscription of those murder victims. It shows just how shocked the local people were at this senseless act of violence and the needless loss of life. Memorial stones such as these were to honour those who had prematurely lost their lives to violence, but it was also used to deter anyone else from committing such a wicked crime. The inscription on the memorial stone reads as follows: under the stone, beneath the tablet, lie the remains of Edward Gummery, Elizabeth his wife, and Anne their daughter, who were cruelly murdered at the cottage known as the Murder House in the parish of Barrow. When looking more deeply into the Hangman's house and the Murder House, I saw that there was some cross-referencing on some of the paranormal activity at both properties. I could not find any reports of a hanging murder at the Hangman's house, but I found out about the Murder House from a reader's letter that was sent to the editor of the newspaper that reported the paranormal activity at the Hangman's house. For now, we return to 1933 with more paranormal activity that happened at the Murder House and that was reported in a local newspaper. The newspaper went on to publish this.
What secret underlies the mystery surrounding the sinister-looking red-brick cottage known as the Murder House on the main Ledbury Road a few miles from Tewkesbury? Is it haunted by the restless spirits of former residents who, many years ago, suffered violent deaths there? These questions are again on the lips of people living in the vicinity of the house. Regularly, at certain periods of the year, strange noises are heard issuing from the derelict building, noises that resemble, with terrifying reality, the groans of human beings crying out with agony. Pedestrians passing along the road from which the cottage is separated by a narrow strip of weed-choked garden land, have again been startled by the weird sounds. The moaning is heard at night, and from alarming high-pitched shrieks it trails off into low agonized whispers. Residents in the district have become accustomed to it and treat the matter with the indifference that comes with a long association, but to strangers the noises are frightening, and a number of people have, from time to time, been scared by them. The cottage has long been disused and now is in an advanced state of dilapidation. Ivy covers the walls and has grown over the decayed thatched roof. The whole place has about it an atmosphere of desolation and decrepitude. The mystery has deepened with the passing of the years, and the belief that the cottage is the scene of periodical ghostly visitations has become increasingly widespread. Many, however, ridicule this suggestion and maintain that the noises are produced by the action of wind and rain blowing through the vacant window spaces of the building. This contention is supported by the fact that the noises are intensified and more distinct on stormy nights, but do not the poets say that on such nights, ghosts are their element? The cottage derives its name from a brutal murder committed in 1780.
After this was reported, the newspaper receives an angry letter from the then current owner of the murder house. So the newspaper made this statement.
In our issue of June 1931, there appeared an article entitled Mystery of the Murder House, which made reference to a cottage on the main road from Tewkesbury to Ledbury. The owner of this cottage, now called Prospect Cottage, Mr. H. E. Partridge, has taken exception to certain statements contained in the article as to the dilapidated condition of the cottage, and the uncultivated state of the garden, and the suggestion that the cottage is haunted. We are sorry that our article should have given offense to Mr. Partridge, and we hereby withdraw our statements contained therein, in any way derogatory to his property.
13 years later, in 1946, the same newspaper reports an update on the murder house.
The surveyor reported he had received permission from the Halifax Building Society to demolish the murder house and to retain the salvaged material. These simple words, presented in the report at the Public Health Services Committee to Upton-on-Severn Rural District Council on Thursday, told of the end of a building to which the grim title, the murder house, has clung for well over a century and a half. When our reporter paused at the murder house on Monday, he found the cottage all but demolished. A small portion of a wall and fireplace and a heap of bricks and stones were all that remained, and council workmen were rapidly completing the work. This cottage with the sinister name had had no legal tenant for several years, but sometimes smoke escaping from the chimney gave away the hideout of some grateful tramp, pausing on his way along the road between Tewkesbury and Ledbury. Several attempts have been made in the past to change the name of the house, and at one time, we understand, it was called Prospect Cottage, but somehow local residents have always favored the title the house earned for itself 166 years ago, when it was the scene of a brutal fourfold murder.
I wondered what had been built on this land, and also where the salvaged material is now. I asked these questions on a post on the Mystical Times blog website, and a reader wrote to me to say she lives just by where the murder house once stood, and the location is now just a field. The reader was planning on going on the anniversary of the murders to see if she could witness any paranormal activity that may still prevail at the site, but as I've not heard back from her, I'm assuming there was nothing to report. That's all for this episode, and I want to wish you all a very spooky Halloween. Till next time.